Greetings from Asbury Park.
I first came to Asbury Park in around 1955 as a young man as the assistant director for the United States Amateur Chess Championship. And it was held then in a really grand old hotel called the Monterey, which no longer exists. We had usually 100, 150 players, and I came every year working with Kenneth Harkness, who was then the business manager of the United States Chess Federation. But the first year that I came, there was a young boy playing by the name of Bobby Fischer, and he was accompanied by his mother, and we didn't take too much notice of him, but I did notice that he played every game to the end, and he wouldn't give up, and he was a terrific little player at that age. He was about 12 or 13, and he came in 12th, I know, in that tournament. There were about 100 players, and you sort of knew that he was an up-and-coming top player. 2 months later, he went to Philadelphia and he played in the U.S. Junior Championship and won it. He was the first player to win it at that young age. He was 13 at that time. And then he really started to take off. He came in 4th a couple of months after that, the U.S. Open Championship and so forth. Asbury Park at that point was quite a seaside resort. It was quite lovely. There was a lot of entertainment, a lot of rides and things that people could do, and carousels and stuff. It was pleasant walking along the boardwalk. And we continued having the tournament at the Monterey for many years. And then finally, one year, I arrived at the Monterey. We always held it on Memorial Day weekend. I arrived at the Monterey, and they had sold it to another company. And I had no place to go, in effect, because they wanted an exorbitant amount of money to come into the grand ballroom. And I didn't know quite what to do. So I walked down the boardwalk, trying to determine what to do. Here I was having, at this point, there were about 150 or 200 players set to play in the tournament, coming from all over the country. And the Empress Motel was in construction at that time. I think it was called the Motel at that point, but it's called the hotel now. But and I walked into the lobby, and the manager of the Monterey had moved over to become the manager of the Empress. And he said, "Why don't you hold your tournament here?" And I said, "Well, you're not finished yet. I mean, you know, they were still painting the place and bringing in furniture, and there were trucks outside and so forth." He said, "Listen, if you bring in your tournament with your 200 players and fill up my hotel," he said, "we'll work 24 hours, we'll get the place in order." So they worked 24 hours, and they did get the place in order. And we positioned someone in front of the Monterey Hotel with a sign that said, "Go walk straight down the boardwalk to the Empress Motel, and that's where the tournament's going to be taking place." And I was the first guest at the Empress Motel, and the Asbury Park Press put my picture on the paper, on the front page of the paper, signing in as the first guest. And then from there on in, we had a number of chess tournaments there, not just the Memorial U.S. Amateur. I used to run a fall tournament, I used to run a spring tournament there, or early spring and fall. I think the fall tournament was called the Harvest Tournament. And instead of, we didn't give out cash prizes as they often do in tournaments now. We gave out trophies. And in terms of the Harvest Tournament, we gave out bags of food. And we would get, you know, goodie bags, but they were really filled with hams and nuts and pickles and other things that I would scrounge up from places from around the area. So every winner would get one of these bags of food instead of cash. The tournament was great. People became so interested in the Empress, like Mrs. Carolyn Marshall, the widow of Frank J. Marshall, a famous grandmaster, came down here with her son several times a year. Nothing to do with the tournament. They just liked coming down, sitting on the boardwalk, going to the Empress, swimming in the swimming pool, and it had a restaurant, maybe the same restaurant, the Ketchup. I think it was the same restaurant that they had 50 years ago. I may be wrong about that, but I know there was a nice restaurant, and they were treated nicely, and so forth. So Asbury Park, in some ways, was the beginning of Bobby Fischer. It was the beginning of Bobby Fischer. It was the first tournament that he really played in. He did play in a simultaneous exhibition about a year or two before then, and he lost his game. That was in Brooklyn, but first tournament was here, and so Asbury Park has something to be proud of. Maybe there should be a plaque or something. Bobby Fischer played here his first tournament in Asbury Park, and then went on to become chess champion of the world.